Coffee is the world's second most tradable commodity after oil. All around the world, coffee is roasted, purchased, and consumed. In fact, 1.1 billion cups are consumed each day, which is 400 billion cups of coffee per year. The burgeoning coffee culture that has sprung up over the last few decades has led to overwhelming success for a handful of coffee franchises and brands. And while no one is denying the right to success, the big question is whether the profits these franchises and brands are making are trickling down to the people actually growing the beans. And how green are they really? And do we know how our coffee habits affect the environment?
There are currently three primary coffee growing export areas in the world, all of them lying close to the equatorial region: Central and South America, Africa and the Middle East, as well as Southeast Asia. These are the supreme growing areas, as the best beans are grown in places with high altitudes, moist tropical climate, where the soil is rich and the temperature is around 21 degrees Celsius, something which all of the equatorial regions offer. Each of the aforementioned coffee exporting areas produce coffee that is distinctive of its climate, topography, and even its growing practices.
After being grown and harvested in each of these different locations, the coffee beans are then being shipped to countries all around the world, where they are roasted and then distributed to supermarkets and cafes. Some of the top coffee importing countries are the United States, Germany, Japan, France, and Italy. And a significant part of the environmental impact is due to the transportation of coffee beans.
Over the last 20 years, with the growing demand of coffee, there has been a move to greater intensification of coffee growing and the heavy use of agrochemicals. The bigger request has also contributed to deforestation to make way for new coffee farms, which have cut the habitat for many animal, plants, and insects that have called the rainforest home. Coffee growing has traditionally been a diverse intercrop system where an outstanding variety of plant and animal life coexists. For example, in Tanzania, coffee is intercropped with banana grasses to provide shade. Of those 10.4 million hectares, the majority is now grown in monocultural low-shade environments. While exposure to more sunlight increases yields, this method has a number of ecological destructive features. Sun cultivation removes all other species to provide unmitigated access to sunlight and easier harvesting. Like all monocultures, sun cultivation contributes to deforestation, erosion, increased blitz, and pests, and that it causes many other serious environmental problems. Additionally, migratory birds, which traditionally use diverse coffee plantations as resting places during their semi-annual migrations, are left without forested spots to rest along their journey, leading to overexhaustion. Another environmental concern with coffee is water use. Coffee growing and production requires immense quantities of water. A recent study estimated that it requires 140 liters of water to grow, process, and prepare a single cup of coffee.
Furthermore, just like everything else, coffee creates a lot of waste after being manufactured. The process of separating the beans from its original plant, water milling, contributes with enormous waste materials in form of pulp, parchment, and residual matter. In the late 1980s, it was estimated that Central America by itself generated 1.1 million tons of pulp and polluted around 110 cubic meters of water every day. As this continues to happen, soil and water resources get affected as the pulp often gets dumped into streams, making the clean water unusable, which millions of people in the coffee-growing watersheds depend on.
A study that was conducted in Costa Rica, which is shown here, shows that the total footprint of coffee from first to final stage, which sums up to be 4.98 kilos of CO2 kilos of green coffee, and can be compared with 18 kilometers of car driving. As carbon dioxide is released in the process of making coffee, It contributes to the release of greenhouse gases, which leads to global warming, leading to climate change, which can cause drought and an increase of tsunamis and changing weathers, which largely will affect all living creatures, including plants and trees, consequently changing our living standards.
The hotspots identified in this study produce about 72% of total emissions across the coffee supply chain, and these are fertilizers, which are applied at farm level, wastewater as a result of the wet milling process, and also the electricity used for the preparation of coffee, which in many cases occurs in our own homes. Compared with other agricultural products such as bananas or pineapples that can be consumed as fresh products, the consumption of coffee requires a considerable amount of carbon dioxide, largely due to the high energy demand from automatic coffee machines. As the world's second most tradable commodity, the coffee industry employs millions of people globally in the various stages of its growth, processing, and trade. However, as widespread as the coffee industry is, its negative environmental effects are equally massive. While the coffee trade is vital to the politics, survival, and economies of many developing nations, the industry's pricing and futures are decided in conference rooms and on stock exchange floors in some of the world's wealthiest cities. As beans pass through the hands of growers, traders, processors, exporters, roasters, and retailers until they finally reach the consumer, it means that the 100 million people growing coffee around the world have been excluded from the huge profit making potential of coffee. On average, coffee farmers receive 10% of the eventual retail price of the product, and most farmers have little idea of where their coffee goes or its retail price. This excludes producing countries from actually claiming a profit, making the industry an unfair one. Coupled with this is competition among growers that has led to price reductions and undercutting, which leaves growers trying to participate in the market with no safety margin when the supply drops or bad weather hits. By 2001, coffee prices had fallen to their lowest levels ever. This plummet in prices impacted more than 25 million households in the coffee producing countries and thus undermined the economic sustainability of countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. The decline of coffee prices can be devastating for farmers abroad. But in the United States, for example, the world's largest consumer of coffee, such fluctuations are barely noticed.
Furthermore, as with sweatshop labor, growers are not always treated well and often work in poor conditions and are unable to earn a reliable living from the work they do, all for a fraction of the cost that the final product is sold for. A study in Jamaica showed that the majority of the workers suffer from at least one symptom depending on the use of chemical pesticides. A similar study from 19 coffee plantations in Kenya showed that the workers were not provided with crucial equipment and did not even have soap to wash their hands with. Neither had any of the workers received proper education about how to use the chemicals, nor did they know what the chemicals were. So what can we do? The answer to what we can do is simple. As consumers, we play a critical role in the life cycle of coffee, being the last ones in the coffee supply chain, where the consumption contributes with the highest environmental impact. Firstly, we need to put demands on the coffee machine market in improving the energy efficiency of coffee machines, as the actual brewing contributes the most to the footprint. We also need to look over our source of electricity so that it is made in an environmentally sustainable manner. Secondly, we can all do an easy adjustment to our current habit and start to buy certified fair trade coffee brands. When a company has a certified label, it means that they support the fair trade market, meaning that farmers' cooperatives deal directly with the retailers and get to sell their coffee for a worthy price. The transparency is more making it possible for the growers to track their coffee, helping them with a guaranteed wage, preventing market fluctuations leaving their pocket. Another certified label you should push towards is the option to start buying Rainforest Alliance certified coffee, as it focuses more on environmental standards compared to the fair trade one, where the focus is on the wages for the growers. However, RA still contributes to the well being of Grow, as its main idea is in investing in sustainable lifestyles and encouraging eco friendly land use practices. The Fairtrade Foundation and Rainforest Alliance do not claim to be the solution to all the problems involved with coffee manufacturing, but it is better to start somewhere, even though the measure may be small. The goal is to move as close as possible towards fairness and sustainability.
Coffee has a considerable impact on the environment, as well as it contributes to an unfair trade between industrialized countries mainly in the north and developing countries in the south. The current situation does not work, which is clearly evident in the coffee industry. Ways to solve the coffee crisis must be found, not only because of global sustainability, but because of the deeply unethical situation consumer countries have created for the producers. As consumers, we're directly and significantly part of the story on the coffee carbon footprint and the socioeconomic impact, and therefore we must be involved in the task of reducing its impact and be part of the solution.